What if the first alien fleet to arrive at Earth came not as conquerors, but as refugees? They bring weapons, technology, and promises of alliance. Yet they carry a past they refuse to name. A past that their enemies claim is soaked in the blood of entire civilizations. Now, humanity stands at a crossroad. Offer sanctuary and risk inheriting their war, or turn them away, and live knowing we may have condemned a species to extinction. For Captain Kiang and her crew, the choice will ignite a battle not only for survival, but for the very soul of human diplomacy. Join us as we uncover the cost of compassion among the stars. Section 1. The Strangers at L4. It began with the kind of contact alert that normally set off every defensive protocol in the Terran Coalition's playbook, yet this one unfolded in silence. Not through klaxons or panic, but through the slow, deliberate tones of the Lunar Defense Grid's command AI. Unidentified fleet. Lagrange point 4. Fleet mass. 5.3 megaton equivalents. Status. Damaged. Configuration. Unknown. On the tactical projection above the control pit, the incoming objects emerge from FTL space like a shiver across black glass, their drives flickering with residual blue-green plasma and scattering debris that trailed like luminous scars across the void. At first glance, they could have been a battle group poised for siege, yet every profile check returned the same anomaly. Hull fractures wide enough to expose skeletal trusses, plating scorched in patterns consistent with directed singularity munitions, and life sign clusters compressed into minimal shielded volumes as if the vessels were running on emergency triage power. Admiral King, overseeing orbital defense coordination from the Tycho Command Hub, authorized a Level 3 contact quarantine, locking every military asset into a flexible intercept posture without committing to first strike. The ships did not advance toward Earth, Mars, or the Belt Colonies. Instead, they formed a loose halo in the stable gravitational pocket of L4, letting their orbits settle into a deliberate stillness. Then came the transmission, not broad spectrum, but targeted to Coalition command channels. Its carrier wave folded through quantum encryption patterns humanity had never seen before, yet somehow adapted instantly to the Coalition's decryption suites. The voice that emerged was deep, resonant, and paced with the gravity of someone carrying both exhaustion and resolve. We are the Tahrin. We come not as conquerors, but as those who have lost all but our lives. Our world is gone. Our fleets are shattered. We seek sanctuary within your sphere. In return, we offer what remains of our knowledge, our defense systems, and our history. The linguistic package embedded in the signal was precise, tailored to human phonetics without losing the alien cadence beneath. In the Tycho command chamber, the implications hit with the weight of two opposing truths. First contact had arrived in the form of war refugees, and those refugees were still armed with weapon systems far beyond anything in the Coalition's current inventory. Analysts whispered about the hull designs, noting the angular geometry optimized not for atmospheric entry or exploration, but for sustained combat in high-radiation war zones. The energy readings from their crippled reactors suggested they could still power weapons with yields in the multi-teraton range, enough to boil oceans from orbit. Yet nothing in their posture hinted at aggression. Medical telemetry, intercepted and reconstructed by human sensors, showed elevated stress markers across all detected life signs. Damage control bots swarmed exposed decks like silver ants on shattered bone. The fleet was bleeding resources into the void, hemorrhaging atmosphere in microfractures, but holding formation with almost ceremonial discipline. The first debates began within hours, messages bouncing between Coalition Council members, military command, and the scientific advisory boards. Was this the moment to extend a hand, to bind a powerful new species to humanity's side through compassion? Or was it the prelude to a more dangerous game? One where the opening move, was the illusion of surrender? Above the Tycho horizon, the alien flagship rotated slowly, its forward hull bearing a symbol etched in deep metallic relief, a spiral of 13 arcs converging toward a central point. Later, archivists would note that the symbol matched none in humanity's entire linguistic database. But in that moment, to every observer on every orbital feed, it looked like an eye, watching, waiting, measuring. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story so far. That would mean a lot to me. Now back to the story. Section 2, Gifts and Bargains. The first official meeting between humanity and the Tahrin did not take place on Earth, Mars, or even within the safety of a neutral station. Instead, it unfolded aboard the Coalition diplomatic cruiser Aurora's Reach, parked in high geosynchronous orbit above the Pacific, its hull polished to a mirror sheen to project an image of calm strength. Admiral Kiang attended as both military oversight and symbolic reassurance, flanked by a coalition of diplomats from every major Terran polity. Across the docking umbilical, the Tahrin flagship's airlock irised open with the soundless grace of advanced engineering, revealing an interior bathed in shifting light, patterns of violet and gold that rippled as if the walls themselves were breathing. The Tahrin delegation emerged in a formation that blended ceremony with martial discipline. They were tall, narrow-framed beings, their skin a deep bronze patterned with faint bioluminescent lines that pulsed in time with their speech. No weapons were visible, but each wore a kind of spine-mounted apparatus humming at a pitch too low for human ears, which Kiang's adjutants identified as personal shield emitters. The Tahrin leader introduced himself as Saratek Var, High Marshal of a fleet that no longer has a war to fight, but cannot yet forget how to fight. His words were precise, almost painfully so, each phrase weighted with both gratitude and caution. Within the Aurora's Reach's primary negotiation chamber, the Tahrin wasted no time on poetic overtures. They presented data cores containing defense schematics, kinetic deflectors with reaction times measured in femtoseconds, hull alloys that could absorb directed energy strikes without venting atmosphere, and long-range sensors capable of resolving objects at astronomical unit distances. Alongside these came packets of agricultural nanotech capable of terraforming barren planetoids within a decade, as well as medical algorithms that could purge over 100 known forms of cancer from human biology. These, Saratek said, his bioluminescent markings dimming in emphasis, are not bribes. They are a covenant. We offer what remains of our civilization to yours, so that what happened to us will not happen to you. The Coalition's diplomatic corps responded with a measured language of cautious optimism, noting that any permanent settlement would require vetting by the Assembly and adherence to planetary quarantine protocols. Yet beneath the surface courtesies, Kiang saw the undercurrent moving fast, military strategists salivating over the potential leap in defensive capability, industrialists calculating profit margins on joint ventures, and political blocs already positioning to claim credit for what might become the most transformative alliance in human history. What none of them missed, however, was the absence of a single detail, the identity of the force that had destroyed the Tahrin homeworld. Every time the subject arose, Saratek's voice cooled into a formality that closed the door without slamming it. The enemy we faced, he would say, will not follow us here. Your skies are safe if we are allowed to rest. It was a promise that sounded both reassuring and incomplete. Kiang had been in enough negotiations to know when the silences were heavier than the words, and in the stillness after Saratek's last answer, she caught something in the alien's eyes. Not fear, not deceit, but a kind of weary calculation, as if weighing not whether to tell the truth, but when. Outside the viewport, the crippled Tahrin fleet drifted in the calm of L4, its ships patched with makeshift repairs, its surviving crews working in quiet synchronization. They had the look of soldiers who had walked too far to turn back, and who understood that even in sanctuary, there would always be a price. If you have enjoyed this story so far, then please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. Let's get back to the story now. Section 3. The First Shadows. For the first 3 weeks after the Tahrin fleet's arrival, the skies above Earth's L4 point were deceptively serene. The alien vessels, once gleaming instruments of war, remained in geostationary anchorage, their drive cores powered down except for minimal life support and inertial control. Coalition observation drones maintained a constant perimeter, logging every emission spike, every internal power fluctuation, every shuttle movement between hulls. On the surface, news networks painted the narrative of a historic act of compassion. Humanity offering shelter to a people who had fought and bled in some far-off war whose details remained painfully abstract. Yet inside Coalition Command, the tone was far less romantic. Admiral King's daily briefings were filled with quiet anomalies. Sensor logs showing transient gravitational eddies near the fleet's outermost carrier, encrypted data bursts between Tahrin vessels that did not route through agreed monitoring channels, and, most troubling, the sudden appearance of spectral energy signatures that bore no match to known Tahrin technology. These were small, flickering echoes at first, easy to dismiss as background noise from L4's already complex gravitational web. But as the days passed, the anomalies began to repeat, always at the same frequency, always in faint counterpoint to the fleet's own life support transmissions. The tipping point came during a systems calibration exercise aboard the Aurora's Reach. Coalition Comms Officer Ian Rourke had been tasked with running a sweep for stray comm bleed between the two fleets when she intercepted a burst of modulated neutrino signals. They were tight beam, low intensity, and completely outside standard Tahrin transmission protocols. At first she assumed it was an internal engineering ping, until she decoded the modulation pattern and realized it was a response, an answer to something already inbound. Qiang was on the bridge within minutes, staring at the data like it might explode in her hands. The inbound signal, triangulated against deep space arrays, wasn't coming from within the solar system. It was coming from just beyond the heliopause, riding on the faint cosmic hiss of interstellar plasma currents. Worse, it was timed perfectly with the Tahrin fleet's emissions, as if someone out there had been waiting for the refugees to speak, and now they were answering back. When Qiang confronted Saratek Var later that evening in the negotiation lounge, the alien leader listened in perfect stillness, his bioluminescent lines dimming to near black. "You think our enemies have found us," he said at last, his voice stripped of the ceremonial warmth he had worn in earlier sessions. "Perhaps they have. Or perhaps they never lost us." He did not deny the transmission. He did not confirm it either. But his next words carried a weight that Qiang would later describe as the first moment she truly understood the scale of the risk. "They will come for us," Saratek said. "And when they do, they will not negotiate. They will demand blood, ours and yours for sheltering us, and they will believe they are right." Outside the viewport, the Tahrin ships seemed smaller than before, their hulls less like the vessels of warriors and more like the battered shells of survivors who had brought their storm with them. In that moment, Qiang knew the Coalition had crossed a threshold. Earth was no longer merely offering sanctuary. Earth was now a declared participant in a war it did not yet understand. Section 4. Pursuers at the Gate. The first definitive detection came not from a military sensor grid, but from the Farpoint Neutrino Observatory, an automated station stationed 3 light hours beyond Neptune's orbit. Its arrays were designed to monitor stellar activity and exotic particle streams for deep space navigation, not to track hostile fleets. Yet the station's AI flagged an anomaly so clean, so structured, that even its conservative threat recognition protocols classified it as intentional emission source approaching. By the time the data reached Coalition Command, the observatory had already logged 12 identical bursts, each separated by exactly 108 seconds, each increasing fractionally in amplitude. Astrophysicists liken the pattern to a heartbeat, one so precise it could only come from a network propulsion array adjusting course through interstellar medium drag. The velocity estimates were staggering. Whoever was out there was traveling at 0.23c, shedding velocity in coordinated increments as if preparing for insertion into the outer system. On the Aurora's reach, Admiral Kiang convened a secure session with her senior staff and Saratek VAR. Holographic projections of the intruders shimmered above the table. Dark, jagged silhouettes rendered from distorted neutrino reflections, each shape trailing a web of faint, irregular filaments. Coalition analysts were still debating whether these were structural spines, weapons arrays, or some entirely alien architecture. "It is them," Saratek said, voice flat but eyes flickering with something between dread and resignation. "The Khor." He let the name hang in the air for a moment, letting its weight settle. "To you, they will appear relentless. To us, they are inevitable." He explained little else. Every question about the Khor's motives or history was met with evasions, with language so carefully chosen it felt like an answer designed to avoid the truth rather than obscure it. What became clear, however, was that the Khor were not merely pursuing a defeated enemy. They were hunting down something they considered unfinished business, something personal enough that they would cross light years to see it done. As the long-range projections updated, the Khor formation split into 3 distinct phalanxes. One maintained the deceleration vector toward the heliopause. The other 2 altered course, sweeping wide arcs that would intercept potential escape routes toward Alpha Centauri and Proxima relays. This was not a scouting party. This was a closing net. Coalition councils across Earth, Mars, and the Belt erupted in heated debate. The moral imperative to protect refugees clashed with the reality that harboring them could bring destruction on a scale not seen since the asteroid defense wars. Military strategists began drawing up contingency evacuation plans for orbital habitats. Diplomats quietly drafted messages to neutral systems, testing the waters for off-world asylum. And yet, despite the fear building in classified channels, the general public knew almost nothing. Official press releases spoke only of heightened deep space monitoring and unrelated navigational drills, even as coalition fleets quietly repositioned toward the outer system choke points. Kiang knew the deception could not last. The Khor would arrive in less than 72 days at their current burn profile, and the first thing they would see was humanity's open shelter for the Tahrin. And the moment that happened, no speech, no negotiation, no carefully crafted alliance could change the fact that Earth had already taken a side. Section 5. The Terms of Survival. The meeting took place in the Aurora's Reach's observation spire, a panoramic chamber designed to show commanders both the stars they navigated and the ships they commanded. Tonight, though, the chamber's sweeping windows framed only the slow rotation of Saturn's rings, pale gold against the velvet dark. The location was deliberate, neutral ground, far enough from Earth to quiet the politicians, close enough to remind everyone what was at stake. Admiral Kiang sat opposite Saratek VAR, whose long, sinewy frame remained perfectly still, as if movement would somehow weaken the words he was about to speak. Flanking him were 2 other Tahrin envoys, both silent, both radiating a tension Kiang had come to recognize as the precursor to something unpleasant. "You believe," Saratek began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of inevitability, "that you have taken in survivors of a war we did not start. That is partly true. The Khor were not our enemy at the beginning. They became our enemy because we refused to surrender what they demanded." Kiang's eyes narrowed. And what was that? For the first time since arriving in Seoul, Saratek hesitated. "A weapon," he said finally, "though not in the form you would understand, not a fleet, not a device. A process, an algorithm that shapes matter at the quantum level, reorganizing any element into another without waste. It can rebuild worlds or unmake them. The implications sank into the air like lead. Every engineer in the coalition knew the theoretical value and danger of universal matter reconfiguration. Entire planetary economies could be built or destroyed overnight. Energy crises could vanish. So could the meaning of scarcity. And in the wrong hands, biospheres could be rewritten into lifeless uniformity in hours. Kiang leaned forward. Do you have this process now? We carry the last fragments of it, Saratek admitted, his eyes shifting toward the silent envoys beside him. It exists only in our memories, in symbiotic neural patterns that cannot be erased without killing the host. The Khor demanded. They will burn every world between here and the edge of the spiral arm to obtain it. And the debt? Kiang asked. Saratek's tone hardened. If you give us sanctuary, if you shield us until the Khor pass or are destroyed, we will give you the process, not a fragment. All of it. You will have the means to end hunger, scarcity, and dependence on fragile supply chains forever. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the Aurora's reactor. Kiang knew what this meant. The process could change the fate of humanity itself, propel it centuries ahead of schedule in its technological evolution. But the moment Earth accepted, it would bind itself to the Tahrin in a way that made neutrality impossible. The Khor would not see sanctuary. They would see collusion. Finally, Saratek leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Admiral, we are not asking you to fight for us without reason. We are offering you a future your species has dreamed of since it first learned to shape metal. The Khor will come. You must decide whether, when they arrive, you face them as hosts who sheltered fugitives, or as the rightful heirs to the most dangerous gift in the galaxy. Section 6. Splintered Councils. The Chamber of the United Earth Coalition Council was not designed for calm debate. It was designed to contain storms. The crescent-shaped hall was lined with terrace seating for planetary representatives, each station surrounded by a shimmering privacy field that could be made transparent or opaque at will. Above, the vaulted dome projected live feeds from every major orbital platform, fleet position, and diplomatic outpost in Seoul. Normally, it was a display of unity. Today, it was a gallery of fracture lines. Admiral Kiang stood at the central podium, delivering her account of the Tahrin proposal without flourish or persuasion. The facts alone were enough to ignite the hall. They claim the Khor will arrive in less than 6 standard weeks, she said evenly, scanning the array of faces before her. They request sanctuary within soul space and, in exchange, offer a technology capable of reshaping the material economy of the entire human sphere. Almost immediately, the feed from the Luna delegation flickered opaque, private deliberation. The Martian block followed seconds later. Voices began to rise from the stations, still transparent. This is madness, declared Representative Andrus from the Jovian Freeports. If even half of what they say is true, we'd be making ourselves the primary target of a species that can wipe out entire civilizations. And what, countered Director Halim of the Belt Union, do you propose we do instead? Turn them away? Let the Khor destroy them, and then come for us once they have the technology in hand. The argument spiraled. Some representatives framed it as a humanitarian obligation. Humanity had been a fledgling frontier culture once, surviving only because stronger powers had chosen not to crush it. Others saw only risk, warning that taking in the Tahrin would make Seoul the next battlefield in a war it did not start. When Kiang revealed the full nature of the process, the ability to transmute matter on a universal scale, the debate intensified. Economists spoke of the death of scarcity, of dismantling every power imbalance built on resource control. Strategists warned that such a shift would collapse existing alliances overnight, and that even without the Khor, humanity's neighbors might act to contain or destroy a suddenly post-scarcity soul system. President Afalayan, presiding from Earth, raised a hand, stilling the chamber. This council must decide. but we will not do so on fear alone. The Tahrin's claims must be verified. We cannot commit to defending them until we know exactly what we are defending. A motion passed to dispatch a scientific team, accompanied by security, to study the surviving Tahrin neural hosts and confirm the existence of the process. It was a compromise that satisfied no one. To those in favor, it was a necessary step toward acceptance. To those opposed, it was already too much, an invitation for the Khor to view Seoul as complicit. As the council adjourned, Kiang caught sight of the Luna delegate's expression, a look not of fear, but calculation. She had seen it before in negotiations where both sides claimed to seek peace, but were already preparing for war. In the corridors outside, aides whispered, news feeds speculated, and fleets adjusted patrol routes without waiting for official orders. The decision had not been made, but the galaxy would not wait for human consensus. Section 7. Proof of the process. The demonstration took place in the shielded laboratory module of the Dauntless Horizon, a research vessel retrofitted with both scientific arrays and military-grade containment fields. Every surface gleamed with sensor equipment, each rig calibrated to measure energy fluctuations, gravitational distortion, and subatomic resonance. The atmosphere inside was tense, not with fear, but with the sharp anticipation of standing on the brink of something that might rewrite the known laws of physics. Dr. Celine Cade, lead xenophysicist for the United Earth Coalition, stood at the observation rail with a dozen other specialists, her eyes fixed on the tall, skeletal Tahrin figure standing in the containment ring. Its pale, jointed limbs moved with precise economy, every gesture calculated. The Tahrin's name, translated poorly into human syllables, was Khor, and it had agreed, reluctantly, to demonstrate a fragment of the process. Around the containment ring floated three inert masses: a sphere of raw iron, a block of ice, and a sealed container of Martian regolith. The dauntless crew had chosen them at random from storage, ensuring no hidden mechanisms could be accused of trickery. Khor's voice came not from its thin mouth, but through the neural translator, a soft layering of tones. You will observe. You will measure. You will not interfere. It raised one arm, and an almost imperceptible ripple of distortion passed through the ring. The instruments flared to life, spiking in ways no baseline model predicted. Gravity warped, not enough to move the observers, but enough to make their inner ears feel a momentary shift in balance. The iron sphere shivered, its surface blurring, then flowing like liquid mercury. Within seconds, it reshaped into a lattice of crystalline carbon, perfectly symmetrical, flawless at the molecular level. Diamond. Gasps broke the silence, but the Tahrin was not done. The ice block shimmered, evaporating without heat into a glowing vapor that condensed into a mass of processed protein, nutrient-rich, ready for consumption, its amino profile already scrolling across the analysis screens. The Martian regolith followed, collapsing into a dense ingot of gold, its atomic structure pure beyond any natural occurrence. The entire transformation had taken less than 30 seconds. Celine's hands trembled as she read the data streaming in. There's no waste, she whispered to no one in particular. No byproducts, no violation of conservation. It's a full-scale reconfiguration at the quantum level. Admiral King, standing behind her, did not take her eyes off the containment field. Now imagine this scaled to planetary systems. But the most unsettling part was what Khor said next, lowering its arm. This is not the process's limit. This is a toy, a child's exercise. We offer you the true design if you will grant us sanctuary. Celine wanted to ask the obvious question, why the Khor would kill for this, but part of her already knew. Technology like this would not merely end scarcity. It would end every power structure in the galaxy built on controlling resources, territory, and supply lines. And for those who had mastered such control, It would be an existential threat. Qiang caught her gaze, a silent exchange passing between them. They both understood the same truth. Once word of this demonstration leaked, and it would, the Khor would not be the only force coming for the Tahrin. Section 8. Pursuit across the void. The alarms came not from Earth, nor from any fleet outpost along the Orion corridor, but from the long-range gravimetric net strung between Neptune's orbit and the heliopause, an early warning lattice meant to track rogue comets, errant warheads, or incoming fleets long before they reached the inner system. The signal reached Admiral Qiang aboard the Dauntless Horizon less than 5 hours after Maith Kair's demonstration. Multiple mass signatures, the duty officer reported voice-tight. Vector, direct from the Perseus Spur. Estimated arrival to the outer markers, 72 hours. Qiang leaned over the console, scanning the gravitational profile. Each spike was clean, deliberate, and matched no known civilian convoy configuration. Confirmed military displacement. The officer hesitated, then nodded grimly. Confirmed. Core drive signatures. 7 capital hulls, 24 escorts. Celine Cade was on the observation deck when she overheard the murmurs ripple through the crew. She stepped forward, unable to stop herself. They didn't even wait for the council to decide. No, Qiang said, turning toward her. And they're not broadcasting demands. No khaz, no warnings. This is a retrieval operation. The word retrieval hit harder than she expected. It meant the Khor did not see Earth as a sovereign power to be negotiated with. They saw the Tahrin, and now the process, as assets to be reclaimed by force. Down in the containment ring, Maith Kair stood motionless, but its luminous eyes tracked every human expression in the room. They have come sooner than I predicted, it said calmly. You must decide now whether you will stand between us and them, or hand us over. Qiang's jaw tightened. The council hasn't. The council will deliberate until the stars burn out. Maith Kair interrupted, its tone still soft but now carrying an edge of something that might have been contempt. The Khor will not. Celine's mind spun with the implications. 7 capital hulls meant a fleet large enough to cripple Earth's outer defenses before reinforcements could arrive. The Dauntless could run, but the Tahrin's arrival had been too public to vanish without a trace. Hiding them would take more than stealth. It would take deception on a scale that could fool not only core sensors, but human ones too, because if Earth's own factions believed the Tahrin were compromised, they might betray them before the Khor even fired shot. In the command center, Qiang opened a secure channel to Fleet Command, requesting immediate dispersal of defense squadrons to Lagrange Gate 1, Titan, and the Mars Defense Ring. Recommend silent alert status. Repeat, silent. Celine caught her gaze. You're not going to hand them over. Qiang's reply was quiet, but resolute. Not yet, but I'm not going to fight blind, either. Hours later, as the Dauntless Horizon slipped into a high-inclination trajectory toward the dark side of Titan, the first confirmed Khor Scout drone breached the heliopause. Its transponder was dead. Its weapons were armed, and every telescope in the system was now watching a war cross the void toward them. Section 9. The Price of Shelter. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened under the orbital glare of the Athena Spire, its assembly chamber a ring of light and shadow that floated above the clouds of equatorial Earth. Delegates from every major bloc were already in motion when Celine and Admiral Qiang stepped onto the floor, the live feed from deep space monitoring still looping in the background. 7 core capital ships, their silhouettes jagged and unmistakable, pushing relentlessly across the heliopause. Chairman Rhee struck the gavel once, his voice carrying the weight of political gravity. We are here to determine whether harboring the Tahrin constitutes a legitimate humanitarian act or a deliberate provocation against the core concordium. Zelenis gut twisted. The phrasing was already poisoned. It wasn't a question of morality. It was about liability. Representative Yoel of the Pan-Pacific Federation spoke first. The Khor claim these Tahrin are not refugees, but war criminals. If this is true, offering them sanctuary makes us complicit. We cannot risk the annihilation of our fleet and orbital infrastructure for the sake of one alien faction survival. From the African Continental Alliance, Minister Okoye countered sharply. Complicit in what? In giving shelter to the hunted? The Tahrin have given us no cause to doubt their sincerity, and unless you've forgotten, their arrival was unarmed. That demonstration in Luna's shadow was hardly unarmed. Yael shot back, her gaze cutting toward King. They showed us a weapon that could end orbital warfare in seconds. If they think that earns our protection, perhaps we should ask what it is they think they've bought. Maith Kir's holographic projection stood at the center of the chamber, its eyes faintly luminescent. We did not come to buy your protection. We came to trade. You speak of morality as though it were separate from survival, but in the deep void they are the same. Celine stepped forward before the session could descend into accusations. The question isn't whether they have weapons. The question is whether the coarse accusations are true, and if they are, whether we trust their justice more than our own. The moment we surrender the Tahrin, we accept the coarse account without evidence. Chairman Ree leaned forward. Commander Cade, your opinion is not without weight, but you must understand. If we refuse, we risk open war. A war the Khor are far more prepared for than we are. Kang's voice was steel. Then we prepare. The Tahrin's technology could be the difference between survival and annihilation. But if we give them up now, we gain nothing and lose the only leverage we have. The chamber went silent as the vote tally appeared on the display. The decision was knife-edged, too close to declare without a final count. Outside, in the cold orbit of Titan, the dauntless horizon waited in powered stealth, the Tahrin delegation aboard, watching the stars for the first glint of Khor drives. The choice was almost made, and once made, it could never be undone. Section 10, Titan's Gambit. The Council's final vote broke along the narrowest possible margin, 51 to 49 in favor of granting the Tahrin provisional sanctuary. There was no applause, no celebration, only the rustle of shifting chairs and the grim awareness that the Khor fleet now had every political pretext it needed to advance. Admiral King didn't wait for the diplomatic dust to settle. By the time Chairman Ree formally adjourned the session, her orders had already left Earth's orbit, encrypted and staggered across multiple relays to avoid Khor interception. On Titan's far side, the dauntless horizon powered up without igniting its primary drives. Every maneuver was executed using compressed gas thrusters and gravitational slingshotting from Saturn's smaller moons, the aim being not to outrun the Khor, but to become invisible to their long-range sensors. The ship carried not only the Tahrin delegation, but also several containers of their technology, artifacts Maith Kir had insisted were core to our memory. Celine suspected the term meant far more than simple history. The gambit was simple in theory, impossible in execution. Move the Tahrin beyond the Khor's immediate scanning range and into a deep space blind zone before the enemy fleet crossed Neptune's orbit. The zone itself was an unstable patch of space known as the Kepler Drift, a lattice of gravitational microlenses formed by debris clusters and rogue planetoids. Even human NAV systems struggled to map it. For Khor scanners, it was worse, a labyrinth of false echoes. On the dauntless Horizons bridge, Celine watched the NAV plot ripple as Titan fell behind them, the pale curve of Saturn sliding slowly out of view. "How long before the Khor pick up our absence?" she asked quietly. "Hours, maybe less," King replied from the tactical console. "Once they realize we've moved, they'll burn straight for Titan. By then, Titan will be empty." Maith Kir stood apart, its gaze fixed on the forward viewport, where Saturn's rings fractured into shards of light. "You take a great risk," it said softly, "for a people you have only just met." Celine didn't look away from the NAV plot. "Risk is the price of choice. We made ours. In the sensor pit, Ensign Morales swore under his breath. Picking up deep-range spikes, Khor burns. They've slowed their approach. That means they're looking for something, Celine murmured. They've guessed. Kiang's jaw tightened. All the more reason to get the Tahrin into the drift before they can triangulate. Helm, burn vector 48/6. Don't exceed fusion threshold. The ship shuddered slightly as maneuvering thrusters whispered against the void. The course approach vector hung in the corner of the display, an arrow of crimson cutting toward the outer system. Celine could feel the weight of every kilometer they needed to cover, every second they still had before the crimson arrow bent in their direction. Some gambits are won by speed, others by silence. This one would demand both. Section 11. The Pursuit. They entered the Kepler drift under the dim red arc of an unnamed dwarf star, its light too faint to register on standard navigational beacons. The dauntless horizon's hull shimmered with intermittent distortions as the gravimetric tide of the drift folded across its surface, bending sensor returns and fragmenting their profile into 1,000 false echoes. Celine had always thought of space as vast and silent, but here it felt compressed. Every maneuver a whisper through a hall of mirrors, every sensor ping reflected and refracted into a dozen contradictory readings. The crew's headsets crackled with phantom telemetry, asteroids where none existed, plasma wakes from ships that were never there. Only the AI, Khor, working in triple redundant algorithms, could parse enough stable data to plot their course without sending them into an impact spiral. The Tahrin delegation had retreated to the diplomatic suite, save for Maith Kayar, who remained on the bridge as if unwilling to cede control of its fate. Its eyes tracked the shifting starscape like someone reading a language no human could decipher. "The drift is older than both our peoples," it murmured. "It was a hiding place long before your maps gave a name." King, leaning over the tactical board, did not look up. "Then let's hope it still hides what needs hiding." The comms officer's voice broke the momentary lull. "Admiral, we have faint pursuit traces. 6, maybe 7 contacts closing fast. Their signal scatter matches Khor warship emissions." Celine's gut clenched. "They found our vector." Kiang's tone stayed steady, but her orders came clipped and fast. "Helm, full drift adaptive burn. Alter course 21 degrees starboard, then cut emissions to 0. We're not outrunning them in here. We're losing them in the noise." The dauntless horizon banked sharply, inertial dampers groaning under the strain. Outside, debris fields spun in slow arcs, fragments of shattered moons glinting with the cold light of the dwarf star. The ship's hull sensors screamed proximity warnings, each one silenced before it could feed the enemy a traceable spike. In the background hum, Celine caught something faint, arrhythmic, almost like a voice at the edge of hearing. She turned to the comms station. "Tell me that's interference." The officer shook his head. "It's a signal, but it's not human, and not Khor either." Maith Kir's head tilted slightly. "The drift remembers. Sometimes it speaks." Kiang's focus never wavered from the tactical plot. "Ignore it. If it's not a threat, it's a distraction, and if it is a threat, we'll deal with it once the Khor aren't breathing down our necks." For nearly an hour, they danced through the labyrinth, each turn chosen not for speed, but for unpredictability, until finally the pursuit traces thinned, then fractured into static. The Khor had either lost them or chosen to fall back, neither option offering real comfort. Celine exhaled slowly, knowing the reprieve was temporary. "If they can track us here," she said quietly, "then hiding won't be enough. They'll keep coming until they get what they want." Maith Kir's gaze shifted to her, unreadable. "And what they want is not just us. Is the debt you take by sheltering us." Section 12. Debt paid in full. The Khor found them again 3 days later, not in the shadow of the drift, but in the open span beyond, where the cover of gravimetric distortion gave way to the cold clarity of interstellar space. The dauntless horizon's long-range scopes lit with hard returns. 10 Khor warships in a hunter spread, their formation narrowing into a spear point that would intersect their trajectory in less than 20 minutes. Celine stood at the tactical station beside Qiang, her hands resting lightly on the display's rim. If we run, they'll hound us until they cut us apart piece by piece. Qiang's eyes locked on the plot, every line of her posture steady. Then we don't run. We make this the last chase they ever try. Maith Khair stepped forward, its elongated silhouette cutting a strange figure against the bridge's light. You cannot match their firepower. Even with our weapons integrated into your ship, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Qiang's reply was cold, precise. We don't need to match them. We need to end the fight before it begins. She looked at Celine. You still have the Tahrin gravitational inverters installed? Celine nodded. They've never been tested at full capacity in combat. The destabilization field could collapse in minutes. Or in seconds. Seconds will be enough, Qiang said. The plan was simple, brutal, and carried no margin for error. They would let the Khor close into engagement range, then trigger the inverters in a synchronous burst with the ship's own warp field generator, creating a localized space-time shear, a sudden, lethal distortion that would wrench every vessel inside the bubble into catastrophic structural stress. The Horizon's own reinforced lattice could survive if the timing was exact. Anything else caught in the trap would be torn apart. Maith Khair regarded them in silence for a long moment before speaking. If you do this, you will confirm to the Khor that you have taken our side. You will inherit our enemies as your own. Qiang didn't flinch. Then so be it. The Khor closed in, their weapons charging, arcs of pale energy dancing along their hulls. Celine's fingers flew over the tactical board, synchronizing the inverter output with the warp field harmonics. The countdown ticked towards 0. Now, Qiang ordered. The burst was invisible at first. No flash, no thunder, only the sudden bending of the starfield as the space-time bubble snapped into existence. Then came the light, a violent fracture of reality itself. As the Khor formation shuddered, twisted, and broke apart, their ships crumpling under impossible vectors before winking out in a cascade of debris and dispersing energy. Silence returned to the bridge, broken only by the hum of cooling systems. Celine looked at the tactical display. No pursuit, no signals, nothing but the drifting remains of what had been a fleet. Qiang turned to Maith Khair. Debt paid in full, or just begun? The alien's gaze was unreadable, its voice quiet. It is never so simple, but today we are alive because of you. That is a truth even the Khor will have to respect eventually. Celine felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Not the burden of the battle won, but the certainty that this was only the first payment in a debt that would bind Earth to the Tahrin for generations to come. As the dauntless Horizon set course for home, she wondered whether humanity had just saved a people or inherited their war. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story, and also please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. That would mean a real lot to me. Now go ahead and listen to your next story here.